In this episode, I chat with Tanya about her recent African adventure, starting in South Africa. From city stays and scenic drives to unforgettable safari experiences, she shares the highlights and stories from the first leg of her trip. Hi and welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Collins, who with my expert guests will take you on a weekly journey to destinations around the globe, providing travel inspiration, itinerary ideas, practical tips and more to help you plan your next travel adventure. Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast with me, Tracy Collins. Today I'm joined by guest Tanya Munro, who some of you may recognise from episode 82 of the UK Travel Planning Podcast, where she joined me to share her UK trip report. Tanya recently returned from an incredible multi-country trip across Southern Africa, and there was so much to cover that we've split this into two episodes. In part one, we're focusing on her time in South Africa, including Cape Town, the garden route, and safari experiences in Kruger National Park. We talk about how she planned the trip, where she stayed, how she got around, and her top tips for anyone thinking of visiting. Make sure you follow or subscribe because part two is coming next week, and that's when we'll continue Tanya's journey through Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, including desert landscapes, border crossings, wildlife encounters, and a visit to Victoria Falls. So hi, Tanya. Great to have you on another episode and welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself for listeners who haven't met you before?
Yes. My name's Tanya and I'm married to John. We've got two adult children and they're two lovely partners and an overindulged fur baby. John and I were adventurers and we love to travel. We've nearly always got our next trip or 3 trips in the pipeline. And I try to live by the mantra, collect moments, not things. I love connecting with people and places and just learning about people's stories.
Yeah, you're after my own heart there, Tanya, because we have exactly the same thoughts about travel. And you've been doing a lot of travel over the last few years.
Yeah.
I chatted with you, as I mentioned, on the UK Travel Planner podcast. But you've just done an epic trip that I absolutely loved following along with this trip. So I'm so glad you've agreed to come and chat about this. So would you like to tell our listeners where you went? I know you traveled with John, but where did you go? Kind of give us a brief overview of your time away.
Yeah, well, this trip it's been number one on my bucket list for the last 35 years. So it was amazing to finally get there because we'd had a couple of false starts over the years. So we went to Southern Africa and we went pretty much we went at the end of June. We were gone pretty much the whole month of July. And we went lots of places while we were over there. We started in South Africa. So we started in Johannesburg and we spent lots of time just tripping around sort of various places. Then we went to Greater Kruger National Park area where we stayed 4 nights in a private reserve. And then following that, we flew from Hoedspruit near there down to Cape Town. And there we set off on a 4-day garden route tour, and it was a small bus tour. We saw heaps of places on the garden route. And then from the garden route, we went back to Cape Town where we had another 3 or 4 nights in Cape Town. So we did little bits here, there and everywhere. Yeah.
And then you went on from that to...
Yes. Oh, yeah. So from there, so that was kind of the South Africa part. And then from there, we flew up to Namibia, to Walvis Bay. And from there, we went up through the top of... Namibia, so sort of straight up to the top of Namibia to Thornhill National Park, across Namibia to Botswana, some time in Botswana, through Botswana into Zimbabwe, where we finished at Victoria Falls.
Wow, it was an epic trip. And obviously I used to live in South Africa and I used to live in Botswana, but I've never been to Namibia. So I cannot wait. Next week, we're going to chat all about that second part of your trip. Can't wait to find out all about Namibia because I'm hopefully get there next year. But yes, it was so exciting to follow along. So this episode, we're going to focus on South Africa. And next week's episode, we're going to look at Namibia, Botswana and Zimbabwe. So let's talk about that South African portion in a little bit more detail. So now let's just talk about the flights, actually, just thinking about that, because obviously you live in Brisbane. So did you fly over to Perth and then that way over to Johannesburg?
No, we didn't. So when I sort of came to book the flight, I had intended to fly via Perth and actually do a bit of a stopover in Perth because I've not been there yet. But when I got looking at the flights, I saw that you could fly via Sydney. So that was probably a little bit shorter for us. and I think it was more cost efficient. And I think they go most days of the week. We're going via Perth. There wasn't as much flexibility time wise, and we had to fit around work and things. So we flew from Brisbane to Sydney, and this was all on Qantas: Brisbane, Sydney, Johannesburg.
And
Yeah.
how long did it take to fly from Sydney to Johannesburg? Is that quite a long flight, I would imagine?
It's about on the way over there, I think it's about just under 14 hours. And on the way back with the winds and things, about 11 and a half. Yeah, so it's not a bad sort of length flight. I spoke
No.
to other people and saw other ways you could go sort of via Singapore and Dubai and that sort of thing. So if you're coming from this sort of east coast of Australia, I'd highly recommend just straight to Joburg.
Oh, that's a great. Honestly didn't know that. I was kind of
Mm.
planning to do that Perth route, and obviously going. I think it's if you go up through Singapore, Dubai, it's going to take you longer
Yeah, a
because at
lot
least
longer, a lot
it's
longer.
straight
Yeah,
across. So that's really good.
yeah.
So let's talk in a little bit more detail about the itinerary. So you landed in Johannesburg. Did you spend any time actually
Yes.
around the Johannesburg area?
Yeah, so we landed in Johannesburg. Sort of actually this was the other good thing about the flight. It landed kind of late afternoon, so as far as your sleep schedules and things, that was good too. So landed in Joburg. We caught they've got like I think it's Gore train, it's called, like a tourist
Yeah.
train. So we
Yep.
caught that from the airport to Sandton. So we got there early evening and then just stayed the 2 nights in Johannesburg, which really only gave us one full day, which was ideal for us because lots of people had told us to be very careful in Johannesburg. It's not safe. It's probably not really designed for as a big tourist kind of mecca, and but we wanted to get a bit of a vibe for South Africa. So we just did a tour like everyone does. That's just sort of highlights of Johannesburg, and takes you out to one of the townships. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you went to. Did you go to Soweto?
Yes, we went to Soweto.
Interesting.
So, and that was actually really great to do that because I I didn't have a lot of idea of the history of South Africa. I remember seeing it on the TV as a kid and lots of trouble, and I remembered obviously Nelson Mandela and apartheid and all of that sort of stuff. But it was really just interesting to go there and to hear the history, to see sort of the remains of that history, to see how the situation currently is. There was a lot more kind of I guess overhang, a lot more impact from that history still currently than what I had been expecting. And I,
Mhm.
I think that was a really good way to sort of just position the whole trip with just learning a lot more about this country before we dived into the really super exciting parts of, animals and all of that sort of stuff. And I think the other thing with that too, it was quite hard to see and hear a lot of this sort of stuff. So it was that day in Joburg. It was a heavy day. But yeah, it was good to see it and then to be able to then follow it up with a lot of lightness with animals and fun stuff.
Mm.
But always having that in the back of your mind as you're traveling through South Africa.
I think it's a good thing to do. So I actually lived in South Africa in the 1980s. I actually lived under the apartheid regime, so I remember exactly what it was like.
Mm.
And I actually went to university in Johannesburg. So I
Oh,
went to
wow.
yeah, yeah. So I kind of lived through that. So I'm glad you did that, and I think it is important to kind of understand where South Africa is now based
Yeah,
on the past and the impact of the past
yeah,
that it's
definitely.
had. So after Johannesburg, you went on to Kruger. So did you drive?
Yeah, we did. So we found a 4 day sort of package sort of thing to Kruger. So we caught a bus from Johannesburg to Kruger, to sort of around the central Kruger area. So I caught a bus. That was a long trip that day. I mean, you did get to see places along the way and the landscape, that sort of thing. I found the landscape not highly different from Australia, to be honest with you, in the scenery. Probably in hindsight, if I was to do it again, I would actually fly from Johannesburg out to Hoedspruit because it really was a long day. And so we got out there and we arrived at Thornhill Safari Lodge, and that's where we had 4 nights there. Um,
Fantastic.
and it was fabulous. We loved it. So yeah,
Brilliant. Brilliant.
yeah,
Now we'll talk a little bit more about the
yeah.
kind of the safari game drive
Yeah.
experiences, and then you flew down to Cape Town.
Yeah, so from there, fortunately, we could have, as part of this package, caught the bus back to to Johannesburg. I'm so pleased we didn't. We flew from Hoedspruit down to Cape Town. We just had one quick night in Cape Town, and the next day we hopped on a small bus garden route tour, which was also fabulous. So we had 4 days around the garden route. There's lots of places you can see on the garden route, and you can do it over 4 days or 3 weeks or what have you. So
Yes,
I
you
guess
can.
it was a matter for us, there were a lot of decisions around that about do you drive, do you do a bus, do you what, whatever. So we're kind of happy with what we landed on. We saw lots of places, Neasner, Mossel Bay. I think it's called Tsitsikamma National Park, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
Tsitsikamma, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
Stony
Tsitsikamma.
Point, Hermanus. So lots and lots of places on that route. And then when you look at, from Cape Town, we sort of went inland for the first bit. So I think it was Outshorn.
Outsoon, yeah.
Yeah, that
Outsoon.
it fixed up my pronunciations because they're all wrong. So we sort of went a bit inland and then out to the coast. So all up, we did about 11 or 1,200 kilometres in that 4 days. So it was quite a big trip, but we really got to see lots of things. So yeah, so that was sort of the garden route bit, and then we got back to Cape Town. Yeah.
And that garden route, just to kind of turn back to that bit as well, that's extremely famous route
Yes.
to go because it is so beautiful. I think the first time I did that I was probably about 14,
Yeah.
and did that a few years after, maybe 14, 15, and then did it a few years afterwards. It's actually quite a while since I've done. I've taken my daughter a couple of times along that route as well, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, beautiful destination. And I think one you kind of mentioned, I know about the kind of scenery when you were in Gauteng in northern South Africa,
Yeah.
is that the thing with the scenery in South Africa changes.
Yes.
There's so much wherever
Yes.
you go. It
Yeah.
kind of is very different climates, very different vegetation,
Yes.
and obviously when you're on the coast, you've got the beautiful views as well.
Yeah.
It's just lovely beaches. I mean, I know we have lovely
Yeah.
beaches in Australia, but they also have gorgeous ones
Yes.
in South Africa too. And then after that, you spent some time in Cape Town itself.
Yes, so I think we had 4 days in Cape Town then, and we loved Cape Town, and that was a surprise. Yeah, we really liked it. One of those days we went out to Cape of Good Hope, so that was kind of full day track trip out there, and the other days we just looked. Oh, we did various things actually in Cape Town. We didn't end up going out to the wine country, unfortunately, which we kind of had hoped to. So we'll have to have another trip back, obviously.
I was going to say you'll have to go
Yeah.
back. Wait, did you manage to get up Table Mountain?
Yeah, we did go up Cable Mountain. We did take the Cheats Way and go, in the cable car. We did
Yeah,
climb
exactly. I
it.
wouldn't do it any other way.
We did toy for a minute there. Do we attempt to climb this or do we climb Lion's Head? But no, we didn't. And you know what? We were super lucky with Cape Town because going at this time of the year, on lots of online forums and stuff, people are like, oh, Cape Town's terrible at this time of the year. Don't go. It's windy, it's rainy, it's cold. The whole time when we were at Kruger on the garden route, you kept hearing stories from people of the atrocious weather in Cape Town. But we got were there actually 3 full days and they were beautiful and sunny and blue
Perfect.
skies every day. So we're very lucky. Yeah.
It can be like that. It's I've used to go in August because of obviously the school holidays when I lived in the
Yes.
UK, and took Dominic over a couple of times in August, and I was looking at my photos the other day and it was blue sky, and
Yeah.
I've just got a fleece jacket on and actually linen
Yeah.
trousers, so it was absolutely fine. I think sometimes it's waiting for the tablecloth is over Table Mountain, and
Yes.
if
Yeah.
you want to go, so I always say to people like book Table Mountain, like check out the weather, but book it because it can get booked up,
Yes.
especially on a day where it's clear.
Yeah, and we booked it for the first day of our trip for that
Yeah,
reason, because I think when you
yeah,
buy the tickets, they last for 7 days. So if you can't go the first day, you've sort of got more days that you can go. So
yeah,
that's,
absolutely.
yeah.
And that's what you want. You don't want to you need to just keep checking. And I remember we did that last time. It was kept checking because you don't want to go when there's clouds. You're not going to see as
Yes,
much,
that's right.
obviously.
Yeah, and it's
And
stunning
it's
up there. You want to see. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a beautiful view from up there.
yeah.
So let's talk about your highlights and standout experiences while you were over there. So kind of now you're reflecting back, it's not that long since you came back. What are the
Uh,
things that you kind of go, wow?
this is such a hard question because we've been home for about just under 3 weeks, and everyone asks it. And honestly, it was this trip, and I've done a reasonable amount of travel. The whole trip was the highlight of my life. I was so scared going over, given it was my number one bucket list, and I'd cancelled this trip twice previously, that it wouldn't live up to expectations, and it far surpassed the expectations. And the whole idea of the trip for me prior to going was the safaris, the animals, and Victoria Falls. So, and look, they certainly were my highlights, but there were so many other highlights. So the safaris were just mind blowing, and I just had so many pinch yourself moments where, wow, this is Africa. I'm in Africa. But another place that I loved was Blyde River Canyon,
Yeah, it's
which
beautiful.
is stunning. And
Yeah.
we went there as a bit of a when we were tossing up the entire trip, and as you know, we went through Namibia, we were looking at going to the Fish River Canyon, which is the second biggest canyon in the world in Namibia. But look, there's so many kilometres, you're talking thousands of kilometres to get through there. And I just wasn't up for all that travel, to be honest with you. So we thought, well, we'll go to Blyde River Canyon, knowing it was a very different type of landscape. It was green rather than desert, because Blyde River Canyon's the third largest canyon in the world. It's absolutely stunning, like so beautiful. So we went on a day trip from our safari lodge with our driver up there, and saw it sort of from on top. And there's a few other sort of bits that go with it. There's the three rendezvous, and there's Burke's potholes, and a few bits and pieces of like that. Up in there, there's a place called God's Window, beautiful scenery. Anyway, we loved it so much that a day or two later, just we were in the middle of the day. Sometimes, at the safari lodge, you might not have much on. So then we actually took another trip out there and saw it from down low and did a boat cruise through there. And the boat
Oh,
cruise was amazing, and it sort of was at sunset, and there were hippos and crocodiles, and just breathtaking. So that was a highlight. Cape Town again. Cape Town wasn't really on our list of things to do. We were going for the animals, and we knew that the middle of the year was a good time for animals. And we knew Cape Town was probably, like I said, going to be rainy. And we got to Cape Town and we were like, this place is beautiful. Table Mountain is just a backdrop everywhere you go, and it's so gorgeous. And then the coastline and the beaches, and again, gorgeous. That whole garden route, so many sort of beautiful scenic places there, and like you said, the scenery is quite diverse. And the first bit of that was a bit sort of deserty. Then there were a lot of mountain type areas, and there's a lookout in there called the Map of Africa, which I think's in the wilderness area, it's called. And no kidding, you stand at the top of this lookout, and behind you, the way the landscape is and the rivers, it looks like Africa. So I've got this photo of us standing there with this, like map of Africa made out of trees, and that was beautiful. On the garden route, we went to an elephant sanctuary where they, rescue elephants. So
was that Addo? Was
no,
that
it
Addo?
wasn't Addo. It was
Oh,
another one. We didn't go up as far as Addo actually on the garden route. We missed that out because these trips you've got to prioritise. I can't think of the name of it. Um, yeah, so I managed. We sort of went for a walk with elephants and got to hold this elephant's trunk and touch it and touch its tail, and so that was pretty cool. In South Africa, Cape Town, another highlight. Was doing a Cape Malay cooking class in the Bocap area. And this lady, Fadala, shout out to her, she was fabulous. She was such a character. And we just had such a fun time doing the cooking class. And seeing the African
what did
bull.
you make? What did you make?
Oh, it was a chicken curry and a few different. I can't even remember now, to be honest with you. There were
It's
like four or
tasty.
five different things, but they are samosas and roti, and so yeah, a whole meal sort of from free to post. There was a dessert, and so yeah, quite a few things, and yeah, it was just lots of fun, and yeah, it was really good. So that was good too. We ended up actually doing that in place of going out to the winery regions for the day. So it was a real toss up about, what are we going to do? But, that's travel. You've got to make your choices. So, yeah.
Exactly. And you can go back the next time and
Yeah,
do the wineries.
yeah.
Sure.
But there's some of the highlights, but I could have a podcast just on the highlights, really. There's so
I
many.
can imagine.
Yeah.
What about any surprises? Obviously, you've mentioned Cape Town, and actually, to be honest, I think Cape Town, its aspect, is probably one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
Mm.
I can't think of anywhere that I like. Split. Split's another one that I kind of
Yeah.
think if you're coming in from the boat and you see Split, but Cape Town, it's
Yeah,
spectacular.
it is spectacular. And just from every angle, really, it doesn't matter where you are. There's nearly always this mountain in the background, and the beaches, and yeah, so beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, look, I think the biggest surprise to me is that South Africa is so much more than the animals and the safaris. Like that was my biggest surprise. I didn't expect that. I've probably already talked about that a bit. I didn't
Mm.
realise how excellent the food would be too.
Oh, food's
And I
amazing.
know it probably is well known for the food, but because I went into this trip with probably 90% focus on the animals, I didn't look a lot beyond. Food was amazing, and I think for us too, our exchange rate, the cost of things over there, and the exchange rate's good. And so everywhere we've travelled in recent sort of history, our exchange rate has been terrible and everything's so much more. Like I went to Hawaii last year and was paying the equivalent of 12 Australian dollars for a cup of, cappuccino. And whereas in South Africa, everything was cheaper. So that was a nice surprise. I didn't really know what to expect from the people, and they were just lovely, helpful. Everyone went out of their way to help us out so much. Another big surprise was I felt much safer than I thought we would. But I probably need to put a caveat onto that and say that's because we were in touristed areas and we really were seeing, for the most part, the best sides. And I've got some South African friends, and look, I know that often when look, I know even in the tourist areas there's dangers around, but I think when you get off that tourist track, particularly, there is. And for example, we were going to a restaurant one night which was a little bit out of the tourist areas in Cape Town. It would have been just over a kilometre from where we were staying. But, everyone said, oh, no, don't walk there. Like, you need to catch an Uber there and that sort of thing. And even when we went sort of downtown Cape Town in the city, we pretty much stuck to walking tours with people that knew where to go and where not to go. So I certainly would say to people, if you were going to Cape Town, or anywhere in South Africa, be very aware of those safety aspects, because you do hear some awful stories. But the places we felt very safe the whole time. And I think the other thing that really shocked me was just the ongoing impact of that awful history that South Africa has. And I just didn't realise just the financial, economic, the deep divide there. That seemed to be a lot of wealth, but just a huge amount of poverty, and the townships, that are just out of town, really, and then these millions of people that are living in, really poor living conditions, and that sort of thing, and the high unemployment too. I think unemployment's up around 50%. So I probably learnt a lot about that while I was there, and just some of the corruption that's occurred in the government and all of that sort of stuff. So that was quite a surprise for me too. I had no idea, and it's stuff I've been looking into a bit more since I've got home and spoken to some South African friends about it, just to get their perspective, because I wasn't really aware of it.
Planning a trip to London, if you're looking for tours that are well organised, full of interesting stories and a pleasure to take part in, I can't recommend Walks and Devour tours enough. I've done several myself, from famous landmarks to amazing food tours, and every single one has been a real highlight. Their guides are great storytellers who make the city feel alive. The team really cares about the details and puts a lot of thought into making each experience feel special, comfortable and full of those "I'm so glad I did this" moments. You can find all my favourite tours at uktravelplanner.com/best London tours. Oh no, that's interesting. I think it surprises people in lots of ways, because it's that, and it's described as a world in one country, and it really is. But the perspective of putting it in the beauty and everything that's there is still putting it in a historic perspective. I think is really important, because I think you've actually got generations of people who are living still with the trauma.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's it. It's that generational trauma. And you can just really feel the impact of that. And, and talking to people, from various walks of life, like, it's just so there. And it's going to take a very, very, couple more generations, I think, for that to lessen. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree. Now let's lighten the topic a little bit and talk a little bit about your safaris and safaris, game drives. So what did you see? What animals did you see in South Africa?
Oh, it was amazing. Like, we saw so many animals. I was going to say, what didn't we see? But you know what we did not see was a leopard. Interestingly, and look, we did so many safari drives, and I couldn't even tell you how many safari drives we did in the whole trip. There were so many, and we sort of started seeing animals, from when we got to our safari lodge on the way there. So just all the elephants, giraffes, zebras, hippos, rhinos, pretty much heaps and heaps of like different sorts of antelope, kudu, springbok, crocodiles, lots of different types of birds, which is kind of interesting for me because I have a phobia of birds. But I have, seriously, it's a bit embarrassing, and I've put it out there to everyone. But it was kind of,
But you know what? You grew up in Australia where they can actually go after you.
well,
So
that's it.
there is justification in
And
that,
that's why
Tanya.
it's the magpies over here. And when you swooped as a little kid, and you've got this bird chasing you down the street. So that's why. So I've got this real thing about birds. But I did get more of an appreciation of birds. There's more beautiful birds over there. Yeah, warthogs, wildebeest, the whole lot. We saw it
You know that.
so much.
And lion, cheetah, and you didn't manage to see the leopard.
No,
I know you did see it later on in the trip because
yeah,
you mentioned it,
maybe.
but
That's a
well,
story for
maybe
another time.
maybe we'll find out next week's episode if you did.
Yes,
Maybe you
maybe
did.
I did.
Um, yeah, obviously, so lion and cheetah.
Yes, so the cheetah experience that was pretty cool. We were in a private game reserve one morning, and I found the safari drive super interesting actually, because sometimes the animals just didn't show up as much as you'd hoped they would. So we're in this game reserve, and we've seen a few things, but not sort of the big ticket items. And yeah, next minute, I think there's a cheetah. It was sort of walking down a path, and we just sat and watched. But then it came up really close, like right beside us, and right beside the safari truck where I was seated. To the point, if I'd just sort of leaned down the side, it was like right beside me. I could have just leaned down and touched it. It was so close, and it sort of stayed around there for a while. So that was really super cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's really
Yeah, and it wasn't
and
interested in us at all, so I wasn't scared at all. Which probably there's quite a lot of things that's a question people ask. Were you scared? And I don't know. I think you're just so much in the awe of the moment and that sort of thing. You don't think too much about safety factors. But in
that's
hindsight,
true.
I'm like, yeah,
True.
probably were a few hairy occasions, really. Yeah,
I think there's been one or two times when I felt a bit too close to a leopard one
yeah,
time
yeah.
because the jeep was between the leopard and its cub, which was not
No,
great, and that was a little bit. But actually, the times where I've been most wary and a little bit worried are more the elephants that
yeah,
when being charged by elephants. In fact, I was in Zimbabwe once. We
yeah.
weren't charged, but we ended up with this bull elephant who was basically just about sitting on the front of the jeep,
Oh gosh,
and the guide was like, "Do not move, do not say anything."
yeah.
And we were all just because it was huge and it was
Wow.
absolutely massive. And you know that they can
Yeah,
turn over the jeep if they decide to.
yeah,
So that was a bit of a scary. The funniest one
yeah.
that I remember was taking Dominique, my daughter, when she was maybe about 14 at the time, and we were in Kwamaratan, and a rhino charged us,
Oh,
and we were driving with the jeep, and me and Dominic were sitting in the back, and this rhino was like charging the jeep, and the jeep's going
oh
fast, and the rhino's
wow.
going faster, and we're leaning over going, oh my goodness. Anyway, eventually it kind of like,
Yeah,
it couldn't keep up,
yeah,
but it was so funny because we were in the back looking at this rhino kind of
yeah.
behind us, so that was
Yeah, so there
funny.
are absolutely some real dangers there. There's actually a YouTube clip of, and I think it's probably in the last 12 months or so, of a sort of a youngish leopard that's leaped up onto the front. Oh, I don't know if you've seen it, of a safari vehicle and sort of on the dashboard, essentially. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and look,
yeah.
we did feel a bit scared. There were a couple of times I did feel a bit scared about lions, I've got to say, and hippos
Mm.
and warthogs, but not generally,
Yeah.
didn't think about.
Well, we'll talk about that next week because you've done something that I'm too scared to do
Oh, okay.
in Botswana. So I'm going to talk to you about that
Yeah,
next week.
okay. Yeah.
You mentioned something
Just in,
because I want to find out
yeah.
the experience.
Just in one of the experience things where we're a bit scared of lions, and it was one of the early days, we hadn't been there long. We came across a group of lions, pride of lions, that had they had a kill, so they had a zebra there, and it was interesting that it was in a sort of bushland sort of area, so we couldn't see it real like super well, but we were very close to it, like a couple of meters away. And this sort of probably the king of the pack sort of thing. He was letting one of the females eat first and not the rest of them. Which I see. I found a lot of these interactions between the animals quite interesting, actually. So he was sort of almost standing guard on this female, this lioness with this zebra, and whenever another lion came near from the same pack, he would just go for them like, "Rah," and they'd have a big fight and this sort of thing. And this was all happening just, literally a couple of meters from where we were. And they were just so strong and ferocious and vicious with each other. So you're like, oh, if they turned on towards us, you wouldn't stand a chance.
Yeah,
So that was
but
interesting. But probably, sorry, I've got lots to say about the animals. Do you want to hear the standout of what happened with the animals?
come on
Okay,
then,
the
Tommy.
standout. So this one night we went for like a nighttime safari drive in Kruger National Park, and We saw a few animals. We saw a couple of lions. I had a couple of lions right beside me or eyeballing me, a bit scary. Yeah, and we saw, some of the usual animals you'd see. But all in all, the actual safari drive was probably a little bit underwhelming because we were expecting that we'd see much more at night time and different things from the day and just wasn't as good as the daytime. So we're like, oh, well, we probably shouldn't have done that. Might have been a bit of a waste of time. So we're driving home. We were still heading to in the Kruger National Park area, but heading towards the outer gate. And it was 10:30 at night, and there was Bobo, our driver, who was fabulous, and he'd brought a friend with him. He wasn't the one who'd taken us on the actual safari. You had to do that with the Kruger staff at night in after hours. So we're driving down the road, and next minute there's this pride of lions sitting in the middle of the road. So it's totally dark. There's no one around, and here's this massive pride of lions, and like at least 20, but there would have been more. And they're just sitting there. And at the top of them, out near the front, there was a white line. So that was very cool. And they're just all sitting there. And then off to the side, there's even more. And so we're able to just sit there and watch them. It was hard to get photos because it was so dark at night and we were a little distance away. But yeah, it was kind of stunning. And well, next day, sort of back at the lodge, we're telling the people, and it's apparently a well-known pride of lions called the Birmingham Pride, that is sort of yeah a really big pride. And like I said, I think it's got. We only saw the one white line, but I think there's two or three in that pride, and apparently we were very fortunate to see that. So that was amazing. Mm.
Wow. Well, it's always so lucky. I think the thing is when you go out on a game drive, you never know what you're going to see
Mm.
wherever you go because they're wild
Yeah,
animals. So it's always a bonus when Doug and I we did a game drive in Sri Lanka.
I
Went out
like
the
it.
one morning, saw hardly
Yeah,
anything. And we went out the next day, and there was the leops
yeah.
hanging out, and we were
Wow.
like, "Wow!" with a kill, and it was like so
Actually, I just
excited.
listened to that podcast yesterday. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't mind going to Sri Lanka. Might get me some
Yeah.
leopards in Sri Lanka. On the garden route
Wow.
too, like I've talked a lot about Kruger, and we did lots of different times of the day game drives in Kruger. But for those people that probably just want to stick around Cape Town, there's a place called the Garden Route Lodge, which is a few hundred kilometres out of Cape Town, and so that's like a small private reserve, and it's just lovely, and it's not as many trees and things, and so the game drives there were fabulous because because it was a private reserve. You could go off road, so you could get up closer to them than what you can within Kruger. And yeah, you sort of had really good vision, I think, because there weren't as many trees and things blocking it. However, in saying that, it's a much smaller place, and some of the animals there, it probably wasn't as organic as Kruger. Some of the animals there actually had been brought in, and they actually supplemented the feeding of the elephants and the lions because there wasn't enough within that reserve. So, if you're after an absolutely super organic one, it's probably not the place. But it was fabulous. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So, did it? I'm assuming what you're going to say here is it went beyond your expectations. Then seeing the animals, the game
Oh,
drive.
yeah, yeah, absolutely beyond my expectations. However, this is a bit embarrassing to admit. When people come to Australia and they expect that they're going to see kangaroos hopping down the street, everywhere you go, and that's actually not our reality. So probably, in some places in Australia you can see kangaroos everywhere, but it's not all over. And I think maybe I had, not to that degree, a little bit of that expectation for South Africa, that maybe I might have seen a few more animals in a few more places than what I did. So yeah, that's almost a bit embarrassing to admit that. But anyway,
I know it's funny when I moved over there in the 80s. I thought there was going to be elephants everywhere. So
yeah.
you know,
Oh, well, that's
it's like
good to know.
I think it's one of those things. I did expect that in Australia, but then I have been places in Australia where there are.
And that's it. And I think that's what I'm saying. I've been places in Australia where you can't. There's kangaroos all over the shop. But for the most part, I don't regularly see them in my daily life. Same as all those other tales of spiders and snakes and all the rest of it that people often say to us. Oh, it's so scary there. Yeah, and I think this is how it was for me in South Africa. There were places, I mean, when you're in those sort of bush areas, the national parks, But by the end of the trip, I unfortunately did get to be one of those people, like your zebras and your giraffes, and you sort of just keep driving, which at the start of the trip, I thought I'd never be like that. I said to John, I don't know why everyone's carrying on about having to see leopards and lions and things. This is amazing. Like, look, everywhere you look, there's giraffes, there's kudos, but by the end, it was kind of like, okay, let's keep driving. Let's find this leopard. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that you do get that kind of safari kind of, I don't know, underwhelm after a
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
trips out because you see the same animals. But it's a bit like, my mum came to Australia last
Yeah.
year and she really wanted to see
Oh,
kangaroos. So we took her out to Stanthorpe. So the first night she sees all these kangaroos. By the third day she was like, oh, kangaroo, whatever.
and that's exactly how it is in Africa. And like I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many photos I took of like zebras and giraffes in the first few days. But yeah, by the end, I'm just like, oh yeah, keep talking to the person beside me as we're driving past them.
No, that is so true. Now talk about your accommodation choices then. Were there any standouts with that?
Yeah, yeah. We like to stay in a variety of accommodation, probably not unlike you guys, I think. So we'll basically stay anywhere as long as it's clean and has a comfortable bed and it's close to the main attractions. Because we were in a lot of tours and things too, we didn't actually get a lot of say in this, but we love the Thornhill Safari Lodge. Look, it wasn't like super fancy; it was fairly mid-range, but it was peaceful and it was in the middle of in the bush, and so it was just really relaxing. And because other than the 2 nights in Johannesburg, it was our first place we stayed, and it was 4 nights. After the long flight, it was kind of a good sort of just a peaceful resting place before things got too busy and crazy. And we were treated like royalty there. One night we were the only people there. But we actually had this whole safari lodge and the staff, the cleaners and the driver and all to ourselves. So that was amazing. And they had a beautiful tree house. So that was a standout. We stayed at the V&A Waterfront in Cape Town. And I think that's always a question, where you're going to stay in Cape Town. So we decided to go to the waterfront, which probably is touristy. But anyway, we really wanted safety and we wanted close proximity where we could walk. So we stayed in an Airbnb there. Right near a couple of the like big hotels that are quite well known. So if people wanted to go hotels, you could. So it was in the Marina complex, and that was fabulous for us because it was beautiful. It was an apartment for a start. We had a washing machine, and this was by now about mid-trip, so it saved going to laundromats. We had the washing machine. We were on a canal, so we had beautiful views. We could walk to the waterfront, and the safety there. It was second to none. There was security on every gate, and had an Uber driver. You had to sort of call security, and yeah, so that was good. And I've mentioned already the Garden Route Safari Lodge. That was actually really very cool. It's probably a bit more of an upmarket safari lodge. Fabulous restaurant, beautiful fireplace, sort of right at the game reserve too.
Oh,
So
nice.
they'd be my standouts. Yeah.
And I stayed in the V&A area as well because you've got all of the shops and lots of great
Yeah.
restaurants as well to choose from
Oh,
as
yes,
well. And I
absolutely.
know you
Yeah.
mentioned about food. So were there any kind of standout
Yeah.
meals?
I loved the game meats actually. That was my big standout. So any sort of game meat, give it to me. I loved it. Kudu, springbok, warthog, Cape buffalo, the whole lot. If I could taste it, I would. Loved it. I also love the ostrich. And it's very healthy for you, ostrich. If we could get it here, I would have it a couple of nights a week. And the crocodile, I love the crocodile. John wasn't so adventurous. I did try the baboti. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Bavoti, yeah. Well, I
Which is
probably don't even pronounce it well, but I
it's
make that here. I love making
Yeah,
it.
you make it. And so many people raved about it. I didn't dislike it, but to me it was like very much like cottage pie, shepherd's pie, except a bit spicier in
Mm.
taste. And so I was like, oh yeah, it's okay, but I wasn't something where I was like, yeah, absolutely have to have it again.
Oh, well, I can't talk to you now, Tanya, when you've said that. Sorry, you've upset me.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I've burst your bubble.
National dish in South Africa. You've
Yeah, I know. So anyway, me, I'm quite honest. So, if anyone's in Cape Town, there's a time out markets. It's called in Cape Town, which is a selection of all different types of food because the cuisine's very sort of multicultural over there, and it was excellent. So you can just go there, and then it's inside, which was great at that time of the year because it was cold, and you can just try all sorts of different food and that sort of thing. So. Yeah, that was a really good place to go. And there's a restaurant too, not far from the waterfront, called the Gold Restaurant. So they give you like it is a touristy thing, but I think it's about 7 courses of like a degustation type menu, and all different sorts of African foods and fabulous entertainment and a really fun night. So I'd highly recommend that.
Oh, no, that sounds great. And we already talked a little bit about how you got around. So most of the time, obviously, you took an internal flight,
Yeah,
and you did the kind of tours. So that makes it easier. So you weren't actually having
yeah,
to
that's
drive
right.
yourself, which I think is probably not a bad idea, to be honest.
And we're not really tour people, but that it was called the Bok Bus, the tour that we did around the garden route. There was only us and one other American woman on it, and the driver, Chris, he was fabulous, and they were kind of like family by the end. But it just in Cape Town, like Uber's fabulous. Like it was really cheap, really efficient. Yeah, so lots of Uber.
Ah, brilliant. Now, what about anybody planning a trip? Because obviously, I know you'll have spent. You're good at planning. You spend a lot of time doing the research and putting stuff together. So, if anybody's planning a first trip to South Africa, have you got any advice that you'd share about kind of the timing of it, you kind of
Yeah.
budget and planning, the safety, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, look, I think I probably have covered a lot of it, but
Yeah.
like you said, I do the research. I'm like, research it well, like talk to people, get yourself on forums and websites where people have actually been there and actually ask questions of local people. I always go to your website, Global Travel Planning, and to see, what you'd recommend the various places. So I went there. I find YouTube very helpful too because you can actually look. I find there's a lot of guff on YouTube, and you've really got to search through what's good and not. So I went there. But look, for us, the middle of the year was good for us. Like they say, especially if you're getting further north, a lot of those safari areas, it's not as green, so you're able to see more animals. So
It's
that was
drier as
probably
well because it's drier as well. So the
yeah,
animals have
that's
got to
right.
come down to the water holes. Whereas if you go over the kind of summer months, wet season, they're not as likely to
Yeah.
need to.
And also, I don't do super well in the heat,
Hmm.
and so probably some of the other parts of the trip, I would have found the heat. I would have enjoyed it.
You
Yeah,
live in
I know you
Australia. You
don't
live
either,
in
do you?
Brisbane. I'm like, Tanya,
No, I'm
are you
all right with
living in the right
Australian
part of
heat.
Australia?
Actually, I just stay in the air conditioning here. I'm not outside tripping all around the north. Yeah, but I kind of feel like if you're in a cold climate, you can rug up, but
Yeah,
when you get to a hot climate, yeah. So for me, probably that time of the year was good. And yeah, my advice always is you can't do everything,
yeah.
but so narrow things down. But have a really well planned itinerary. So I'm a massive over planner, but then I know that if I don't get to do everything, it's okay. I find when I have free days, I get all muddled up and I'm like, oh, what are we going to do? And then I spend ages researching it and waste too much time. So I
Mm.
find actually better off to be over planned, and then kind of trim back.
I
Yeah.
think that's a good
Anyway.
idea because sometimes if you don't, you exactly what you're saying. You end up then having doing the research, thinking about what you're going to do, and then half your day's gone before you've actually got out of the accommodation because you've been thinking, "Oh, what are
Yeah.
you going to do?" We do that with food all the time. Doug and I, it's our big
Yes.
thing about figuring out where we're going to eat because if we don't, I can
Yes.
guarantee we'll spend 3 hours walking around trying to find somewhere to eat.
Yeah, and we do too. And actually, this trip was the very first time. And it was only about 2 days before I left. I researched the food. I got on a South African forum, asked for advice, booked myself into restaurants and things, and so actually was much better. I didn't plan that, but I'd left one spare day in Cape Town with a few different options on what maybe we could do. But then I spent, all the night before, spending all this time trying to research further, and I wish I hadn't have done that. I wished I'd just booked, had something lined up before I left. But I always say to people, remember, you can sleep at home, so make the most of absolutely every opportunity.
No, I
I think
totally
these sorts
agree.
of holidays are really for a rest. They're for to get out, see the world, have experiences and things. Yeah, so make the most of it. Yeah.
Well, no, absolutely. Now, without giving too much away, can you give us a quick teaser of what's coming in part two when you travelled into Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe?
Okay, I've got a couple quick ones. Did we see a leopard in the next part of our trip? Yes or no? Second one, what was something I ate that most people would balk at? And third one, what happened on the light plane trip that was unexpected?
Oh, exciting. And I'm going to put in a number four. What did Tanya do in Botswana that I am too scared
Okay,
to do?
super curious about that too. So, okay, looking forward to the next chat.
Absolutely right. Now, we're going to end this episode. We've been talking, I can't believe it, but good 40 minutes, Tanya, which is, I mean, brilliant. We've gone into a lot of information about your trip
Yeah.
for South Africa, which is brilliant. Honestly, it's been, I love talking about South Africa anyway. But what would be the one tip you'd share with somebody planning a trip to South Africa?
Yeah, it's a bit of a serious pointer, I guess, but it's learn about the history of South Africa early in your trip, and we've already discussed this. It's an awful history, but the impacts are still widely felt, and it really just helped us to understand things from a cultural viewpoint and just position the trip well. So start your trip in Johannesburg.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Tanya, for joining me for part one of your amazing African adventure. So we're gonna chat in a second. We're actually gonna record episode 2 now, but because you won't get it when you're listening until next week, so don't forget to follow along so that you don't miss what happened with Tanya's second part of her African adventure. Thanks again, Tanya.
Okay, thanks.
Again, a huge thank you to Tanya for joining me to share part 1 of her incredible Africa trip. I hope you found her stories and trips about travelling through South Africa, including Cape Town, the Garden Route and Kruger National Park, both helpful and inspiring. Don't forget, part 2 is coming next week, where we'll pick up the journey in Namibia, Botswana and Zimbabwe with more wildlife, spectacular scenery and one of the world's most iconic natural wonders. Do you have a question or your own travel story to share? Head to SpeakPipe and leave us a voice message. We'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to sponsor the show or simply support our work, you'll find the links in the show notes, whether it's buying us a cup of tea, leaving a review, or sharing the episode with a fellow traveller. Thanks again for listening, and as always, happy global travel planning. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. For more details and links to everything we discussed today, check out the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favourite podcast app, because your feedback helps us reach more travel enthusiasts just like you. Anyway, that leaves me to say, as always, happy global travel planning.